Hey, folks. Thanks for tuning in to Ken Michaels Radio. I hope you've been enjoying the interviews that I've been doing with people in the Beatle world. And we invite guests on here who are either Beatles authors, people who have worked with the Beatles, experts on the Beatles, podcasters, you name it. I love talking Beatles with just about anybody. And it's kind of ironic that the last show that we did, I had a friend of mine come on, Dave Ghosty Wills from WFDU, and we talked about an album that we felt was very underrated in the Beatles canon, and in this case, Paul McCartney's catalog, and that being Driving Rain. And we happen to have with us a special guest who played keyboards on that very same album. And his name is Gabe Dixon. We're going to talk about his career before Paul, during Paul, and after Paul. We're going to cover it all here on the show at this time. Welcome, Gabe Dixon, to Ken Michaels Radio.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Why don't we just talk about your early beginnings? I know that you were born in Tennessee.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what led you to study piano? Was that the one instrument that was your instrument of choice, or did you have a lot of
Uh,
interest?
we had a piano in the house, and I just kind of gravitated toward it. When I was a toddler, I started trying to reach the keys, and my I I think at one point there was a piece of music that was like a simple little notated piece of music that had notes, and I wanted to learn how to play it. I think it was like "O Little Town of Bethlehem" or something, and I really liked that Christmas carol, and so I had my mom write the names of the notes over the actual notes on the
Mm.
page, and then I somehow figured out a way to write with green marker all of the notes on the piano itself, um, so that I could match them up and play the song. I think I must have been maybe 5 when I did that, and
Okay.
so at that point, my mom was like, "Okay, I'm a little peeved at you for writing on my piano, but I think maybe we need to get you piano lessons because you seem to like music a lot." So that's where it started, and started taking classical lessons when I was 7. And
Mm.
just they just always knew. They'd take me to concerts in the park when I was a little bitty toddler in Houston, Texas. We lived there for a couple years, and we'd go see the symphony. I'd just be like standing up, like trying to conduct the symphony, as a kid. And the, it was always there somewhere.
You're a born performer from an early age. I
It
guess
seems
did
so.
your mom play the piano?
She did, yeah. That was one of those things. My mom and all her siblings, and they all just kind of played. They weren't professionals, but they all took lessons, and it was just kind of something you did, was just play piano. And
Mm.
so they always had a piano around, and there were opportunities for me to get up there and mess with it.
Mm. Now, I know that you're a big fan growing up of both Elton John and Billy Joel.
Hmm.
Can you explain how they influence your music? I mean, I hear it when I
Oh,
listen
cool.
to you play, especially there's
Great.
times when you're playing something where I'm feeling, oh, Elton John would do that. So, were those your two favorites in music?
I'd say Elton for sure. I loved Billy Joel, but Elton was always something we listened to. My parents were big fans, so they had some of the vinyl records, like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and then we had like
Mm.
when I was a kid, we had cassettes, so we would listen to like the Elton John, greatest love songs cassette, and then the greatest hits, and I just would ask for it every time we got in the car, and eventually I got a songbook that had all the chords, and I kind of could like learn how to play it. I just started trying to sound like Elton. It was really, for whatever reason, just really inspiring
Mm.
to me. And I'd say Billy Joel. I came to Billy Joel a little bit later, um, but honestly, it was Beatles and Elton John were kind of the two biggest, and maybe Jerry Lee Lewis, like early
Okay.
on, were
Nothing wrong
kind
with that.
of. Those are the first. The first song I learned how to play and sing on the piano was "Great Balls of Fire," and then the second one was "Hey Jude," and I think maybe the third one was "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road." So those
Okay.
were those were my jams.
Well, I know you were born in 1977.
Hmm.
You're still a youngin. in my book.
Great. I'll take it. Sure.
But how did the Beatles enter your life? Was that through your parents or what?
Definitely through my parents. My mother was a massive fan when she was a teenager, and I always talk about how she got kicked out of the Hard Day's Night movie because she was screaming too loud.
Hmm.
So she was one of those girls, um, and Paul was her favorite, and so she made sure that all of her kids like knew about the Beatles and they played the Beatles. We had the first like video cassette we had was this thing called the Beatles Anthology, I think it was,
Sure.
with kind of a red cover. And so I watched that as a kid, and that really sort of blew my mind and kind of opened my eyes to them and just helped me fall in love with them. She had this record called the Beatles Rock and Roll also,
Hmm.
that was them basically doing rock and roll songs of the time, like Money
Sure.
and like I can Twist and Shout, and like a bunch of stuff. And I just wore that out, man. It was like just the most exciting thing I'd ever heard in my life,
Uh-huh.
as a probably 7 year old to 8 year old.
That was a compilation that came out in 1976 and did
Oh,
very well,
oh, huh.
and so this was right before you were born, and Got to Get You Into My Life was a top 10 single that year. It was released as a single in the United States. It went top 10. Yeah, it was released from that compilation. And at the same
Huh.
time that Paul was doing so well with Wings on the charts, we also had a Beatles single going top 10, and the compilation itself went to number two. So,
Are you talking about the one? It was a vinyl record, and it had them as young dudes on the cover, and then the back cover was them, the same shot but from behind, and it was almost illustrated. It was like a sort of a drawing of a photo, a vinyl
mm,
record. It's the only place I've ever
it,
seen it, but
well, I'm trying to think because it's been a long time since I've looked at the cover, but the original cover was kind of like done in a 50 style to evoke that era with, like going to having a Coke uh,
yeah,
glass with, that kind of thing,
yeah,
and yeah,
I think that was the one. Yeah,
but
that's
they
cool. I had
also,
no idea that it
yeah.
was released that late.
Oh
That's
yeah,
awesome.
the 70s there were a number of compilations that came out. There was a Red and Blue collection from 1962 to 66 and 67 to 70. It was like a best of with hits and album cuts. They had rock and roll music. They had love songs, which were just love songs and ballads that followed rock and roll music. And then they also had Live at the Hollywood Bowl. And they had other compilations in the early 80s, rarities and real music, music from the films, and 20 greatest hits. So compilations were a big thing, especially in the 70s with the Beatles. They did really
Mm.
well.
Awesome. Wow.
Yeah. Would you say the Beatles have influenced your music?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't even know. I don't think you necessarily. It's like an obvious thing when you hear a lot of my music, but it's just right there at the beginning. I mean, there's just they're like their music was like the template. It was like the palette
Hmm.
that's kind of. I mean, it's I yeah. I mean, lots of songs I'd say that I've written have Beatles in there. Almost every song, probably.
As a songwriter, what do you look for most when you're writing? Because to me, there's so many aspects of the Beatles music that you can talk about. But between John, Paul, and George, they're three of the greatest melodic songwriters of all time. Is
Hmm.
melody something that you stress in your
Melody,
music? Is that
yeah.
is that like the most important thing, or?
Not always, but I am a sucker for melody. Like I can't. I if it's got a great melody, it's you know it's better in my opinion. But some things are just rhythmic and groove songs, and that sort of thing, and those are fun. But that certainly melody is something I learned from the Beatles and Paul probably
Hmm.
most of all because he has such a great melodic sense, and sometimes I wonder if the Beatles, the Beatles influenced me directly a lot, but I think they also influenced me through other people that I listened to that also were influenced by the Beatles.
Sure.
I mean, everybody in the from that time on. I mean, not everybody, but a lot of people in pop music have been influenced by the Beatles. So it's just so pervasive. It's like, yeah, they're in there.
And you could certainly say that about Elton John and Billy Joel.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah,
totally.
they both freely admitted it. And with Billy, there's so many times I'm listening to him and that's like a McCartney melody
Hmm.
there, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's Lennon-esque, but you can tell.
And honestly, even though I love Billy Joel, a lot of people compare me to him, and I think it's partially because he sounds a little like Paul, and sometimes I sound a little like Paul. And so
Hmm.
it's like you put that with the fact that I'm playing piano, and it's like, oh, Billy Joel's got to be his number one guy,
Yeah.
And he's up there. But he wasn't like Elton for me. Like Tumbleweed Connection, that record, and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and Madman Across the Water. Those were like just I couldn't get enough of that stuff.
There's a lot of people that pinpoint that period, that early period of Elton as being his best, certainly the most impactful. And I was into Elton John when your song came out, and
Hmm.
that album just called Elton John is still one of the greatest albums of all time for me, and had all those classical, um,
Yeah,
you know, that kind of production that
60
Gus
years
Dudgeon
on.
did, and it's amazing what was
Yeah.
done then. And you also being brought up on classical,
Hmm.
you must have appreciated that too.
Absolutely, yeah. And I heard that about Elton, that he'd gone to a music conservatory, and it was
Hmm.
really inspiring to me. I was like, well, maybe I should keep up the classical thing. And I didn't find out till later that he'd like dropped out, but but it was kind of that. Yeah, it was because I was learning Beethoven and like Grieg and Bach and Debussy and stuff like that, and I could hear some of that in Elton's music too, and even in some of the Beatles music. So yeah, I resonated with it for sure.
Yeah. Well, that Elton John album, just for everyone who follows me, is one of the greatest albums. And I love all that stuff. I love,
Hmm.
a lot of Elton's music through the years, but certainly that album with your song on it, Paul Buckmaster with his arrangements, just absolutely stunning. Oh,
Hmm.
anyway,
Yeah,
so in the middle of all this, were you following Paul's solo career?
I was. Yeah, I had the All the Best CD
Hmm.
when I was maybe like 12 years old or so, and that was sort of my introduction to his solo stuff. And I loved it. I mean, I played that a lot. It had like Jet, it had Say Say Say, it had like a
Yeah.
bunch of his great songs. I mean, Live and Let Die. I think my folks also had the Band on the Run vinyl, so I listened to that a good
Mm.
bit, the Wings thing, and yeah. So I was always he was always kind of my favorite, even though they were so great together,
Mm.
but as far as solo stuff, I've actually come to like John's and George's thing more than I used to, but back in the day, Paul was just the coolest to me, back when I was a teenager. Um, and so I ate all that stuff up and just listened to it
Oh.
nonstop. Learned how to play a lot of it, and um, it was fun.
Sure. So you went to college in Miami
Hmm.
and you formed a band there, the Gabe Dixon Band. You put out a few albums. What was that experience like? And by the way, you were signed by David Kahne.
Hmm. Yeah.
How did that all happen? How
So
did he discover you?
my band started playing when I was at the University of Miami, and then when we all graduated, we moved up to New York City and started playing around, trying to get noticed, I guess. And we were playing this one little club and in Midtown, and somebody sent David out to see us, and he was head of A&R at Warner Brothers Records at the time.
Mm,
And
okay.
he really loved the show, and so he said, "Can we meet tomorrow?" And we went to the Warner building the next day and met with him in his office. And he was, in the course of our meeting, he mentioned that he was going to be producing Paul McCartney's next record, and was talking about, how cool that was, and
Uh-huh.
talking to him with Paul about the songs, and how Paul was like, kind of doing, pretending to play drums and telling him all these ideas, and I was just like, that is, I can't even believe that. That would be the coolest thing ever to even just be in the same room with Paul. And so he just kind of mentioned it in passing. We went and did our deal and started recording with David at the studio in L.A. What was it called? Jim Henson Recording
Sure.
Studios, the old
Hmm.
A&M studios.
Yeah.
And we did our album in January of 2001. And the very next month, David was going to be recording Paul's record in the same studio. And so we did our thing for like 3 weeks, and it was a great album. But somewhere in the course of that, I went in and did a Hammond B3 organ overdub on my record, and
Hmm.
came back in, and I guess David was impressed, and so he was like, "Hey man, you're like really good. Do you wanna like play on the Paul record?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I'd love to." Which I thought would just be like, "Oh, come in and play a little overdub or something." But he was like, "No, like I want you to be like in the band. We're gonna be recording. He really wants it to be like everybody playing together, and
Hmm.
in the studio, and just you want to be, I mean, Paul plays keyboards too, but he's going to mostly be playing bass tracking, so
Hmm.
it'd be great if you could come in and play as the keyboard player and background vocalist and that sort of thing." So
Yeah.
after I you know lifted my jaw off the floor, I was like, yeah, I'd love to, please, anytime. And so we recorded, me and Paul and Rusty Anderson and Abe Laboriel Jr. and David Kahne all recorded for 3 weeks that next month, and then 3 weeks in June of that year,
Mm.
um, and created Driving Rain.
Yeah. Had you known Rusty and Abe at all before that?
I never met him. I knew of Abe, um, just because my manager at the time managed K.D. Lang, and Abe had played drums with K.D. Lang.
Okay.
I knew he was amazing, and I knew a couple guys who went to Berklee College of Music with him. And I just knew Rusty from David talking about how great he was, because Rusty had played on an Elton John record that had just come out.
Hmm.
So I saw his name in the credits there, but no, that was my first time meeting those guys, was during that session.
Okay. And was there any kind of audition, or did Paul just take David's word for it?
He just took David's word. I mean, I think the unspoken thing was, hey, if Paul didn't like what I was doing after a few days, then they'd find somebody else. But he had a lot of confidence in David,
Hmm.
and so yeah, it worked out great. And I met him that first day, and uh, he was awesome. It was probably the most surreal thing for me, being such a huge fan, to be there with him and meeting him and everything. But he made everybody feel comfortable, and he's just a fun dude to be around, and so super talented that it all kind of flowed pretty well.
Hmm.
You know.
Okay. Before you talk about your work on that album, tell me about David Kahn. Were you familiar with his work prior to meeting him? And what do you think he brought to that album? Because every producer that's worked with Paul has their own sound and their own
Yeah.
style.
David, I didn't really know about him until I met him at that club that I was playing with my band at, and
Hmm.
I I knew his work and didn't realize it. I knew the stuff with Sugar Ray
Yeah.
because it was really popular in the late '90s, and I knew a couple of, like, Sublime. I really liked Sublime a lot in the '90s, and he had produced that and a couple other things, and so I thought it was an odd choice, but once I worked, well, like, for Paul to work with him, but once I worked with him, I realized how creative he is. He's a really, you know we just approached music in a different way, and he was very much into, I think, editing and, like, making records in the box, like,
Hmm.
with Pro Tools or Logic and this and that. I think at the time he was using Logic as software. He was doing all kinds of cool editing stuff that I didn't really see happening anywhere else. And I just think he was good at letting people do what they did, like what they were doing. Like for my band at least, and for the Paul record, he didn't really put a huge stamp on it, but he kind of enabled us to be to find what it is that we wanted to find, and he was a good voice for like, yeah, I like that, or no, maybe not that. He kind of was like a conductor that wasn't too obtrusive. You know, he was just good presence in the studio. And I think his he said his challenge, like a lot of producers' challenge with Paul, is that they love him so much that they have to be like, okay, you know, how can I find that place of authority where I can be like, no, I don't like that, Paul, or you know, you know, because he's Paul McCartney. I mean,
Yeah.
and so to be able to take the position of why, like, that's not cool, man. Let's do something different. Is not an easy, straightforward thing for a producer, you know.
When you've had as much success as Paul and you've made so many right decisions,
Yeah,
how do you
exactly.
tell someone, well, that may not be the best way to go about doing this? So did you feel that they reached that they were very comfortable with each other and
I
David
think
could say
so.
anything to Paul?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think so. I think he was able to do it. I think he just at one point expressed to me how it was like, kind of, who am I to say this, you know? But
Hmm.
it's like, but he got there for sure, you know. And I think that's part of why Paul liked working with him, you know, is because they could just be honest with each other, you know. That was my sense anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, David helped a lot, I'm sure, with like editing. We did this one jam on the album that ended up being a song called "Rinse the Raindrops"
Sure.
that was probably, I don't know how long. It was at least 30 minutes long.
Oh, the
When
whole
we
thing was? Because on the album it's 10
Right.
minutes. Yeah.
So they found, I wasn't there, but they kind of found the parts and sort of put that song
Hmm.
together because we
The-
just were playing. He was like, I got this thing, Rinse the Raindrops. It kind of goes like this, and then it maybe goes into this section, and we just like went for it and like had a great time, just like we were just partying with music for like over 30 minutes, and then David pulled it, I guess, reined it back into a
yeah.
reasonable length of time. So that you know, he was good for that kind of stuff and for a lot of stuff. I mean, it was a lot of his gear. We were using his preamp, you know, some of his preamps, and we had another guy, engineer, I believe Mark Durnley was his name,
Hmm.
I think, and he helped a lot for sure with the sonic part of it.
Interesting. Also, David did a lot of work on synthesizers on the album.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, I was wondering if you can comment about, well, I like all the songs on this album, I must let you know, but
Really?
I Do is a favorite of mine. And there's all this like orchestral sounds, which I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking is coming from the synthesizer. Is that all from him?
That I know he did a fair amount of, and yes, now that you mention it, he was doing a lot of that kind of programming where
Hmm.
he would have these extensive sample libraries of strings, and he
Yeah.
would do these staccato things, and yeah, he programmed in a lot of that stuff. And there were one or two where they got somebody else to come in and arrange real strings, but now that you mention it, there were a couple where they kept David's sort of stuff you really couldn't accomplish with real strings. I mean, just like fun rhythmic staccato string stuff. And he was always tinkering with that kind of stuff on all of his projects. It seemed like he was at the time working on some kind of thing with was it Twyla Tharp? Is that her? The choreographer, the
Yeah.
ballet person, and so he was way into that, and and so I mean he got. It seemed like he couldn't have slept more than 5 hours a night, David. I mean, he would be up first thing and like working, and then we'd be in the studio. We'd probably get there. I'd get there about 10, and then Paul would show up around 12, and we'd record until about dinner time, and then we'd all go our separate ways, whatever, do dinner, and then David would always come back, and he'd be there working in his studio till at least midnight. It seemed like
Uh-huh.
or one, just editing and doing all kinds of different projects because he was still head of A&R at Warner Brothers. So it's just like the dude was an amazing worker and so creative.
That's a lot of multitasking there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I think it was after that record, shortly after that, he decided that he just wanted to be a producer, and he kind of stopped. He left Warner Brothers,
Mm.
um, which was not great for my band, but but it was great for him, because he really he's a creative dude. He just wanted to be on the creative side of things.
Yeah.
So
Well, I love his production on Driving Rain.
me
And
too.
I wish that he and Paul would work together again. But something about the songs in particular about this album, it has a feel to me as though this is live in the studio. This is how we sound. It's not an absolute perfect take, but it's close to it, and that's good enough. And therefore, it sounds more real.
Hmm.
And I love that kind of vibe that you get throughout the album. Was that the plan all along between Paul and David?
I don't know. I assume that's just kind of the way it fell. The thing that struck me is that there were a lot of songs that just didn't have a clean ending. They just kind of like trail off and whatever, and we
Hmm.
didn't like set an ending, which was at the time that was my sort of thing. Well, and here's how you end it, or you fade it, But this was kind of like stuff would just be straggling off, and it's like, which I like now. I'm like
Yeah.
that's kind of cool about it. It was very casual, but yeah, we were just he would take Paul would gather up. He had these DAT tapes at the
Hmm.
time that he would go upstairs, listen. They had his little like song memos on them, or like sometimes complete songs, and he'd go up to the lounge and listen, and kind of figure out what he wanted to bring down to show us
Hmm.
which song. And they were in various forms. Sometimes it was like a pretty good sounding demo, and sometimes it was three separate little from like there's a song called "Lover to a Friend" where he brought something in, three separate ideas for the song, and they were all recorded in different situations. One was recorded after he was like in India, and it was after he'd come home from a party, and he just set up his recorder on the piano
Uh-huh.
and started playing the chorus. So we heard that, and then he said, "Oh, and here's the verse idea. I think I did this a couple weeks later in London or whatever." And here's and so we would sort of make sense of it and sit there and write a chart. Um, Me and Abe and Rusty, and there'd be a brief discussion about what to do. But most of the time, Paul was going to was going to play on the bass.
Hmm.
He really, I think, on that record wanted that to be his main instrument. And I think that's something maybe David talked about with him too, because David always really appreciated his sort of counterpoint that happened between his melodies and his bass melodies.
Hmm.
Um, and so we were trying to go for that as much as we could. So Paul would play bass. Abe would usually play drums, unless he created. He sometimes would create a little loop, like a drum loop, like electronically, and then he'd play over it. And then Rusty would play guitar, and I was always like, and Paul would say, "Well, what do you think?" And I was, "Well, how about Wurlitzer?" It's like, "Yeah, okay, let's give it a shot." And we'd go in and we'd try it. Um,
Yeah.
so
That song From a Lover to a Friend, there's two pianos on there, so it's you and Paul on it. Do you remember what part you played? Because there's one part that sounds like arpeggios,
mhm.
and I'm wondering if that's you playing that part, if you can remember.
I played the tracking piano. I played the boom boom. You know,
Uh-huh.
I remember playing that. They may have added something afterwards when they were overdubbing, but when we recorded it, I was playing the piano and Paul was playing the bass, Abe on drums and Rusty on guitar.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of songs in Paul's career amount to a lot of song fragments that are strung together. And it
Mhm.
sounds like that's what From a Lover to a Friend was. And somehow it all works. It flows very
That
well.
one, yeah, and that was the most bizarre thing because the way he was playing it in those little song fragment recordings, it was sort of disjointed. There were odd time bars. You know,
Mm.
he'd kind of wait. It's in 4/4. You know, he's like from a lover to, from a lover to a friend. That you love again. And then you'd have like a little, almost like he was trying to think of what to do next.
Yeah.
And we liked it so much, we were like, why don't we just leave those odd bars in there with the extra time or the shorter length, and we just like notated them out. We were like, here we're gonna do a bar of 5. Here we're gonna do, just so we could match the sort of intimate, honest feeling that he had on those little voice memos.
I was
Um,
wondering about that. That middle part, how can I walk when I can't find a way? And then
yeah,
there are those moments when there's that extra beat and it
yeah,
doesn't sound like, is that supposed to be that way? But it's interesting.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's so much in the subconscious, sort of unintentional thing that happens when you first have an idea, and especially since the fact that it was kind of about Linda and how she was no longer alive, and it just felt like, let's preserve as much of that feeling and instinct as we can on that song, you know. So it felt like the right thing to do, and he was all for it. So
Yeah, I love that song. That chorus is just, it sticks in your head. It's simple, but you can't get it out of your head once it's there. When you were talking about endings, unusual endings, I immediately think of Magic. And it's like the band starts jamming at the end. Was that
oh yeah.
just, how did that happen? Was that just something that they just decided to leave in? Did the band feel naturally, hey, let's just do this? Because
Yeah, I think
it's,
we were just having fun. We weren't. If I remember correctly, I don't fully remember, but I do
mm,
remember we'd kind of get to the end of a song or finished it, and we were just having so much fun playing that we just kind of kept going, Um, and Paul was having a great time, so he would just kind of want to just keep on rocking, and we were like all with him.
mm. Were many of the songs kind of like From a Lover to a Friend because you had to piece all those segments together, those fragments together? I wonder sometimes if the songs were fully structured going in,
Mhm.
or did you make it up as you went along?
No, they were. I mean, the vast majority of them were fully structured. I mean, he'd have a form and just kind of play it, and it'd pretty much all be there, and we just have to figure out what instrument we wanted to play and what parts to play.
Mm.
But no, he very much had the songs written, except for From a Lover to a Friend, and then there was one called Riding to Jaipur that
Mm.
he had the main theme, and he knew what the sections were going to be, but he hadn't necessarily decided how many there were going to be, and so that kind of got worked out there on the day, and but it was he had his songs ready, like all little lyrics were written and all that kind of thing. So
Yeah,
it,
I was thinking spinning on an Axis, which is one of my favorite songs, is very freeform. And
mhm,
Paul's having a lot of fun with his vocals, especially. He's just sounds like he's just ad-libbing a lot.
mhm. He probably
So,
was.
yeah, and that's what I like about it.
Yeah, I mean it depends. Yeah, it depends on what you mean by the song. I mean, you know, there are parts of a lot of the songs that were quote unquote done that were allowed for, let's make this happen right now. Let's what is this gonna be in this moment? But the
Mm,
basic song structures were all pretty much there.
yeah. So, and I like to ask this question to everyone that's worked in the studio with Paul. Did he know exactly what he wanted you to play, or did he allow you to bring in your own ideas?
Oh no, he wanted us to play what we thought was good, and if he didn't like it, he would maybe redirect and say, maybe try this. I mean, mostly it was just about um, the main question for me was which instrument should I play? Should I play piano or Rhodes or
Mm.
Wurlitzer or B3, Hammond B3, um, and that was usually just something I said, maybe I'll do this, and I talked to David about it, and I talked to Paul, and like, yeah, great, good idea. There was one time where on Riding to Jaipur, where I was playing all this flurry piano stuff and kind of playing along,
Mm.
but I wasn't really doing anything like definitive, and I think he wanted to hear this one specific line in his head that he was hearing in his head, that he just, after I did a couple takes overdubs on the piano, I had me play this one thing. It was like so the riff of the song, I think, was like.
Hmm.
Right, and he was playing that on this cool Indian stringed instrument, and so he wanted to hear at one point me harmonize with that. He wanted me to go, so he was like, could you just play this boom 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 just a couple times, on the
Interesting.
third go around or whatever. So. But that, other than that, he didn't really have much to say about what I was playing, because we were all kind of playing as a band together, and it wasn't like, okay, here's the keyboard part, here's the.
Mm.
We worked out some background vocals together, and he was like, "Oh, I'm hearing this. Could you sing this?" But other than that, we kind of just between us and David, we just let it happen.
You were mentioning, because you played the Hammond, you played a Wurlitzer, and a Fender Rhodes. Were those all your choices? Did he trust your judgment in which ones to play, or did he have that in the back of his mind?
Usually, yeah. If I had a strong feeling about it, yeah, he always trusted it. I sometimes I just wasn't sure, and I wanted to know his opinion,
Uh-huh.
So I'd say, what do you think I should play? And he'd say, well, I don't know. What do you think? How about Wurlitzer? But sometimes he'd say, I think piano in this one.
Hmm.
But there were a handful of songs that he actually tracked on the piano, like "Loving Flame." He played the piano on, and so then I'm gonna play something else, obviously. So I played organ on that. Um, but yeah, that's that's the thing. And then sometimes he'd play drums on a song. He'd track on drums, and so
Hmm.
Rusty would play bass, and Abe would, or no, Rusty. Let's see, what did Abe do? Abe would play percussion, or I think Paul played drums on one song, and then on one song Paul played guitar, so Rusty played bass. Um, and yeah, that was fun to watch. It was fun to watch his process, just because he was so simple. There's just so much simplicity, and um, it seemed like a lot of ease in the
Hmm.
in the process.
Yeah. Must have been
Not
interesting to see all these musicians switching instruments around.
Yeah, I was amazed by everybody, but Abe, how he would kind of create these. He had this little Roland hand sonic like drum pad thing,
Hmm.
and he would just create these little loops on the fly, and like with loop pedals, and kind of like loop a cool little beat that would become the bass, sort of the underlying rhythmic part of the track, and then
Hmm.
a couple songs we would do that and then play over it, you know. And I'd never seen anything like that, so that was a trip for me
Yeah.
to watch that.
Do you remember the song "She's Given Up Talking"? There's a
Yeah.
moment in there where I'm not sure if that's you playing it, but when Paul's doing the "When She Comes Home," it's the yappy yap yap part, and it sounds like a loud accordion, at least in my
Hmm.
ears. Um,
I'd have to go
and
back and listen.
you you're listed as Hammond organ on that, so
Uh
I'm
huh.
wondering if that's you.
Could be. I like to make weird sounds with the organ. It's sort of. I don't know which sound you're talking about. I'd have to go back and listen, but I do know they wanted. They wanted me to do some of this. I do this sort of creeping in, like spooky, sort of textured stuff on the B3 that I
Hmm.
remember David wanting me to do a lot of. It sort of goes like, it turns the Leslie on and it kind of spins and sort of
Yeah.
creates this atmosphere. I think I did do a good bit of that on She's Given Up Talking. Yeah, I'd have to go back
Okay.
and
I
listen.
like the effect there.
Thanks.
And one of my favorite songs on the album, which I often wish had been a single, is "Tiny Bubble." And I
Hmm.
think you're kind of all over that, aren't you?
Yeah, I play a lot of organ on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember what key it's in. All the world's a tiny bubble floating inside. Those of us
Yeah.
who notice are expected to. On the organ, I was playing some
Yep.
like little stabs. Yeah. Yeah. That was a fun one. I think didn't he write that with his son
No.
James?
Um, well, back in the Sunshine Again, I know James is
That
on there.
okay.
Um,
That might have been the one he wrote with him. I thought it was Tiny Bubble, but yeah, James came in one day and played. I
mm.
remember he was there for one day and just we met him and hung out and he kind of put his stuff on it and that was fun.
What was that like? Observing father and son together.
I mean, it was good. Uh, he kind of he was a nice guy and put a lot of just kind of he has a lot of like had a lot of angst in his playing. I remember it was very like dissonant and kind of like um, he was he yeah. I mean, it was cool. You know, he just came in and started putting all this distorted guitar on everything and not on everything, but on that song.
Mm.
And you know, it was a nice day. Nice to meet him. You know, he was a pretty good dude. So I, there was not really a dynamic. They were just working together, and Paul was like, "This is my son," and you know he's, you know, did some writing together, and he's going to play some guitar on this, and yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. You also, I know in the credits it lists Jeff Emrick there as one of the engineers. Did you spend any time talking to him? Did you observe him in any way in the way that he worked?
I don't remember that. No, I don't remember
Hmm.
meeting him. No.
Okay. He's listed in the credits.
Huh. There were a lot of people coming and going at times that I didn't know who they were. I mean,
And
I did, but you
yeah.
know, people would drop by. You know, I might have been like doing something else at the time, or whatever, or that might have been. What did they list him in the credits as doing? Was it like engineering
I'd
or?
have to, yeah, as an engineer.
I don't remember Jeff Emrick being an engineer. They may have taken an old track because he used to work with he
Oh, I know. Yeah.
yeah yeah as you know, but like I wonder if they took an old track that he had worked on from the past and maybe put it in to the record. I don't know. I wish I could
Hmm.
give you a good answer on that, but it'd be a good question
Okay.
for David Kahn.
Okay. Is this an album that you frequently go back and listen to? Driving Rain?
um, every once in a while. I mean, for a long time, yes, yeah. I mean, I loved it. I was just like, man,
Mm.
this is awesome. Just haven't in the last few years. I'll maybe once a year or so I'll just put it on and be like, oh yeah, just kind of reminisce and dig it. It's I like it a lot, uh, but you know, I don't really. There aren't that many albums that I just go back to and listen to a lot.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so
But apart from liking this album, it's a very proud moment for you, obviously.
yeah,
So,
oh for sure, it was like the one of the most incredible, amazing experiences of my life. Between that and playing the concert for New York City, and you know, doing even the other show I did with him was a benefit where we did songs from the record and also some Beatles stuff. We did Long and Winding Road. I remember it was going to be his first time playing Long and Winding Road on the bass and singing it live.
Hmm.
So he had to show me how to play the piano part, and I remember that was a really special moment for me because we were in the studio and he's like, "Yeah, you want to play piano in this?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." And he's like, "Okay, great. Well, let me just show you what I'm doing a little bit." And I was like, "Okay." So he kind of showed me what he did and the little stuff he would always do in this spot or that spot, and that was really nice because after he finished that, he played me a song that he was thinking about for the record. He's like, "Yeah," because I asked him, I was like, "So is this all the songs you think we'll be doing? Have we pretty much recorded everything?" He's like, "Well, I was thinking about one more, and would you like to hear it?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So we were just the two of us in the piano booth, and he played me "Driving Rain,"
Hmm.
and it was awesome. And he finished, and he was like, "Yeah, so what do you think?"
Hmm.
I was like, "I think it's great." What am what am I going to say? I was just
Uh,
still so overwhelmed with the whole thing. I think that I think he might have actually been asking for constructive feedback, but I didn't have it in me to like. I thought it was just great, And I said,
mhm.
"Yeah, let's put it on the record," And after that, I got to have my moment with him where I really just gushed and was like, "Hey, you and your music have meant so much to me and my family growing up, and my mom's a huge fan. I've loved your music forever." And he
Mhm.
was very gracious and thank you so much. Even though he's probably heard it a billion times,
Right.
he was really gracious about it and said he really, really appreciated that, and he thought I was a great musician and was really happy to be working with me and stuff. So
That's great. And
it's
it's
cool.
something to say about him that he would be looking for your feedback,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know? I
Yeah.
mean, he could turn to anybody he wants to in the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had this experience for many years playing piano with your band and all, and still, you know, you're a really young guy and he's
Yeah.
asking for you opinion, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, I was 23 when I was working with him, and I was thinking about it, and I think he might have been 23 when he wrote Yesterday. so, so it's like, man, he he was the lack of ego was actually a little surprising to me. The fact that he gave just as much attention to me, and when he met my parents, and that as he gave to, like, you know whoever was in Bill Clinton came into the dressing room and was
mm,
talking. It was just like he was just a beautiful presence. I thought.
yeah. Just looking back on Driving Rain, are there favorite songs of yours?
Um, I like
Eh,
writing to Jaipur. I mean, just because I got to really like play a lot of cool piano on it.
mm,
I also like From a Lover to a Friend a lot, and um, I mean, Rinse the Raindrops is just fun to listen to because we were just jamming. You know,
hmm.
uh, I don't know. I need to go back and listen to it. Again, it's been a few months, so I
Yeah.
gotta check it out.
Well, it was an album that I liked from the start, and these days I love it so much more.
Awesome. Well, that's a
You
good
know,
sign.
it really has risen in stature for me. It's just
Cool.
that there's so many other McCartney albums that I love. Where do you pick?
Hmm.
But yeah, there's so much that I like. The variety on this album. I do like the production. I love Paul's bass playing. I think he worked a lot harder on his bass playing on this particular album. And I love every stage of McCartney's career. And he's recorded in so many different ways with different producers. Some albums he records quickly, some he labors on for a few years. You have this incredible smorgasbord to pick
Hmm.
from
Yeah.
of so many different types of albums. And Driving Rain has really risen for
Hmm.
me as it's becoming more and more of a favorite and one that I think is very much overlooked. And I hope, because I've noticed another album which is a favorite of mine that is a very polarizing album amongst McCartney fans is Press to Play, and it's starting to get more respect now.
Hmm.
And I'm kind of hoping the same thing will happen with Driving Rain.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
uh, I need to check out Press to Play. I think it's been a long time since I heard it. I don't remember disliking it or liking it. So I need to get more familiar with that. Which era is that from? When
That's
did that come?
1986.
86. Okay, I need to make a note of that.
It's in between Give My Regards to Broad Street and well, then he had the single of Spies Like Us, and
Yeah,
then he had Press to Play, and then Flowers in the Dirt.
yeah.
But also he did the Russian album in between Press to Play
Hmm.
and Flowers in the Dirt, and he did a lot of recording with Phil Ramone. A lot of that wasn't released. It's kind of trickling out as bonus tracks. He's done
Wow.
so much stuff. You
I mean,
know,
I love Phil Ramone so much. I'd love to hear some of that stuff. Like, what has he done? What did he do with Phil Ramone?
I'll send you some MP3s.
Okay,
Okay.
sounds good. Sounds good.
All right. The concert for New York, just a few memories that you have of that. That must have been, again, you're 23 at this time,
Hmm.
and there you are at Madison Square Garden. That alone has got to be a mind blower.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I loved that my parents got to come and meet him in person, and there everybody. It was such a beautiful experience because it was all raising money for the firefighters,
Hmm.
families of those who lost their loved ones in the 9/11 attack, and I mean the spirit was just so good, and everybody was just there to help and wanted to stand united, as it was like a big moment of like coming together after this chaos of 9/11. And I think everybody in the like I felt, and I think a lot of people in the country felt like they just wanted to do something to help at that
Sure.
time, and so just to be able to be there, like lending my talents to this thing, and even though it was like a lot of fun for me, I also kind of felt like, well, I'm in this small way, like pitching in to be a part of this thing that raises money, and that really made me feel just happy. And the fact that Paul shared his dressing room with us, and all the people who were coming in and out, the celebrities, and it was kind
Mm.
of amazing. And to get to jam on stage with like Billy Joel, and we did Let It Be, and I played the Wurlitzer while Billy Joel played the organ right next to me. Eric Clapton played the guitar, and Paul was playing piano, and Sheryl Crow was up there, and it was like this beautiful moment. The Who were on the bill
Yep.
back when Entwistle was still alive and on bass, and I mean, gosh, David Bowie,
Yeah.
passing David Bowie in the hallway. I mean, it was just like what it was just awesome. I don't even know where to begin. Uh, I it was just the kind of thing that I'll never forget. And I was happy to be a part of it. And I think they actually did raise a lot of money, and it was a good cause. So
Yeah. Must have
and
been surreal.
it was so surreal, and it was also what I loved was it was another opportunity to play some Beatles songs with Paul, because we'd only really done the record stuff, and so we
Right.
did I'm Down, and we did Let It Be, and we did I can't remember
Well, from a lover to a friend, you did.
well that one, yeah.
Yeah.
um,
Freedom, obviously.
Freedom.
Um,
So I got to I
yeah.
remember that we were playing Freedom at the end, and I was playing piano, and for some reason Jimmy Fallon was playing, like sitting there singing on my mic at the end, and he was like all up in my business, and which was fun. It was cool, but I was like, man, I'm trying to play the actual piano part, and he's like all up in the mic and stuff. I was like, that's cool. We're all having fun. It's Jimmy
Hmm.
Fallon. No big deal.
By any chance, did the band help to select the songs that were going to be done, or was that all Paul's choice?
It was all Paul, really. I think he wanted to do some from the new album. We might have tried one in rehearsal didn't that we decided not to do. I can't remember, but he knew he wanted to do 2 or 3 from the new record, and then 2 or 3 Beatles
Yeah, he did
songs.
Lonely Road. You guys did Lonely Road.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
yeah, which turned out to be an incredible song live,
Hmm.
you know, the following year when the band toured.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an incredible concert, an amazing experience. Sometimes just watching the reaction of people in the audience crying, you
Hmm.
get a lump in your throat
Yeah.
knowing how much that concert meant to people.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, just
He even said before we went out, he said, if I get choked up and can't finish singing the song yesterday, you guys
hmm,
just jump in and start singing, okay?
uh,
It's like, okay, man. That was, it was
okay.
powerful. And him doing that, and like James Taylor doing Fire and Rain, and like, I mean, it was just like a magical, beautiful healing moment for everybody.
What a perfect song to do,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, for sure.
incredible. So let's talk about you now. I know that you've been putting out some singles on your own,
Hmm.
and you have a new album coming out. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, it's called "Lay It On Me." It was going to come out last year, but the whole tour, I was going to go out and open for Tedeschi Trucks Band in St. Paul and the Broken Bones, and that all got moved
Hmm.
to this year, and now it's been moved again. But I'm going to put the album out anyway this year. It's called "Lay It On Me," and it's a collection of songs that I did with my friend Dustin Ransom, who's a great producer, and man, we just kind of built the songs from the ground up most of the time. He's kind of a multi instrumentalist, and so he played drums and bass and some guitar, and I played some the keys and percussion, and this and that. And we kind of put this album together. Most of this albums, all the other albums I've done have been from just like getting a band together and we go in and we record. But this one was different. And sometimes when you stack it like that and you start with drums and then you do bass, it can like lose the feel a little bit. But somehow it really worked out well on this album. So I'm putting out a single next week, and then another one a few weeks after that, and then the full record's going to come out in June, I believe.
Hmm.
So
So the single that I heard, which does sound very Billy Joelish. I think that's which one was that? Something Good?
yeah, something good. That is probably the most Billy Joel sounding song I've ever recorded. Um, that's okay. I love Billy Joel. I get compared to him all the time. People come up after shows and they're like, "All right, I'm gonna say a name. I don't know if you've ever heard this one before." I'm like, "Billy Joel." Yeah, how'd you know? Because you're the 2200th person. Yeah, but
And yeah, you also have a song that was in a movie called Find My Way. Kind of ironic since Paul has a new song called Find My Way right now.
oh
But
yeah.
that was pretty cool to get that in a movie. That was what film
Hmm.
was that?
It was called The Proposal, starring
Oh,
Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds and Betty White. Yeah, that was awesome because it's the first 2 minutes of the film, and it's like the opening credits, and they played pretty much the whole song. So a lot of people discovered my music from that. You know, so people still send me like text of that they just happen to be watching the movie and the song's on, so they video it and send it to me, and I'm like,
uh-huh.
find my way.
And
There it is.
placement in the film is very important.
That's true.
So
It's not like the third song in the end credits. It's like the opening title track song.
these days, it's like I'm so aware when you see movies on cable television or on regular TV, and they speed the ending of the film while the credits are going on, and you
Hmm.
barely hear the song. It's like,
Yeah,
don't get your song at the very end of the movie, you
yeah.
know. At the very
If only we,
beginning, it's
if only we could all control that.
I
But
know,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah. And when I've heard you perform "Find My Way," that's your playing is very much like Elton John on that song.
Cool. Yeah, he does. He does that. That rhythmic kind of like that kind
Yep.
of thing. That I mean, you don't really hear it from a lot of singer songwriters. A lot of singer songwriters play guitar, so you know, there are just a handful of people that do that on piano, so I feel like it's kind of natural for me to get comparisons with them. You know, Ben Folds does the same kind of stuff, you know,
Yeah.
and Billy Joel, and you know, but yeah, man, I just like tried to copy Elton John note for note when I was 12 and 13 years old, so it's
Mm.
all in there.
Well, you're learning from the masters, as far as I'm concerned. If you're learning from the Beatles and Elton John and Billy Joel, and they all have their own styles that they develop, but at the same time, you can hear in Elton John classical, country, blues all mixed together, and I'm
Hmm.
sure that that comes across in the songs that you write. Same thing with the Beatles being so eclectic, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean that's the best bit of advice my dad ever gave me about music was, and he's not a musician at all, but I went off to college and he said just soak up as much different kinds, you know, as many different kinds of music as you can. Just like absorb everything, no matter what the genre. Just take it in and make it your own. You know, it's like,
Mm,
yeah, that's pretty insightful. So I've tried to do that. That's why a lot of times people have difficulty, you know, putting me in a category. You know,
mm,
because I might have one song that sounds like Billy Joel, and one song that sounds like salsa music, and one song that sounds like some like indie rocker, and another song that sounds, I don't know, like blues or
mm.
gospel or something, you know, or country. So I think it's a good thing. That's all actually what I always loved about Paul and the Beatles, and like a lot of those artists is they, I guess you call them generally like pop or rock or whatever, but they were eclectic. I mean, their records were, each song had a total, like the White Album. I mean, those
Yes.
songs are very different from each other, you know, stylistically and vibe wise, and I love that. I mean, why put out an album if every song's gonna sound like the same template, same type of thing, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah, that's one
if
of
I
the
got
things that
some,
I admire about all these artists. And I've always pointed to the White Album as being like the
mm,
most eclectic album. It's all over the place musically. To go
mm-hmm,
from Helter Skelter to Honey Pie to Revolution Number Nine,
mm-hmm,
and Good Night, or a country song like Don't Pass Me By, or a
yeah,
bluesy song like Your Blues. You know,
uh-huh,
all the folk stuff, Mother Nature's Son, Blackbird, Julia. There's so much in there, and it all came from the same band,
yeah,
and that alone is just so shocking. That a band can master so many styles and do them well. And
mm-hmm,
Paul McCartney in particular he's got to be the most eclectic artist we've ever had if you really study all of his solo music too, because he's dabbled in everything practically. um,
mm,
so yeah, and those are the
yeah.
people that I tend to admire the most. And so I'm glad to see that those are your heroes too.
Yeah, and I mean you'll hear that on the new record. I mean the first track sounds like a kind of like a gospel groove song, and the second one's like that Billy Joel sounding something
Hmm.
good, and then the third one is like a couple of them have like an almost an '80s thing. They're kind of with like synths on the song, and one's more of like a funk thing, and then the last is just like a piano um, ballad sort of. So it's, and one is a duet with a female artist um, that I can't announce yet, but but yeah, I think it's, I wouldn't say it's all over the map, but it's definitely, hopefully it keeps your interest. And I put a couple of musical transitions in between just to kind of make it more of an album rather than here's a bunch of like single songs that just stuffed together, you know. So there are a couple of instrumental tracks that are just to lead you from one song to the next.
All
So
right, cool.
yeah,
So the new album is due out when exactly?
it's due out in June, um,
Okay.
in probably middle of June.
Okay. And
So
the
yeah,
name is?
the name is "Lay It on Me,"
Okay.
and the
Very good.
first song that I'll release from it comes out next Friday, I believe it is. So that'd be April the, not sure when this is airing, but April the what, 16th? Is that the Friday? Or no, April the
Um,
8th, April the
this
16th.
today, it'll go up in a day, this video,
Okay. So
you
first
know.
song comes out April 16th, and then the next song comes out in May, and that'll actually have a music video with it. And then the full album will be out in June.
Okay, I'll be more than happy to share your videos on my Facebook page and let all my listeners and viewers know all about it. And you do have your own YouTube page,
Yeah,
and in
I do.
fact, you've done your own concerts from right where you are.
That's true. Yeah, this is where I do it. That's right.
Yeah, it's live at Gabe's house. It's called.
Yeah, and I've just kind of kept them up, so you can, except for the ones I did on Stage It and on Instagram Live, like all the other ones are still on my YouTube page, so you can go and check them out there. And I'll continue to release. I'm gonna actually get more active on YouTube, so feel free to. I guess if you subscribe, then you can get notified
Hmm.
when I release something. So yeah, subscribe to my channel and your channel too.
Yes, thank you. And you have your own website too.
That's right. Yeah, just GabeDixon.com and I'm on all the social media stuff, Instagram and Facebook and whatever else, Twitter. I don't. Yeah. So I actually am launching TikTok this week, so that should be fun.
So you're all over the place.
That's right. You can find me.
Well, Gabe, this has been sheer joy talking to you. And
Thanks.
I wish you much luck with the new album. Come back anytime. Let me know what's going on with you, and I'll be sure to post all those links to go along with this video. And thanks for joining me here.
You're welcome, man. Thanks for having me.
And to all my viewers, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe if you can. Also, check out the other YouTube channels that I'm on for my podcasts, Things We Said Today, and Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles videocast. We've got to do a review of Driving Rain on that one. Maybe we'll do
Do it.
that soon.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. And thank you, Gabe. And we'll see you next time.